Welcome to The Curious Investor, Saxo's video series on topics that drive the investment markets. I am Hou Tian, and together with me in the Singapore office is Saxo's market strategist, Charu Chanana. Charu and I are talking about some of the outrageous predictions that the Strats team have for 2024.
Hi, Hou Tian. Yes, I think, this is our annual publication. We come up with this every December. And it is one of the, most read articles that we do all throughout the year, I think it's a very interesting piece. It's really not about what we are forecasting for next year. Like the name says, these are outrageous predictions. And what we are really trying to cover here is some blind angles, because we believe that any large moves in your portfolios will come from things that are completely unexpected as of the present moment. So I think this is a really useful exercise to find those blind angles, to have some really interesting conversations on the dinner table when you meet for Christmas, when you meet your family, when you meet your friends. So I think, there's a lot of thought that goes into it from the whole of the Strats team here at Saxo. And I'm pretty sure we get a lot of love for it as well.
Yeah, so I've actually seen the report that's available on our platform that talks about the end of the road. And one of the articles that really caught my attention was the one on the oil price predictions, or should I say outrageous predictions in this case, because it was saying that we're seeing a price of $150 a barrel, which is a long shot from where we are today at $70. And what's with the Audi? Sorry, not the Audi. It's the Saudis buying the UEFA championship. What's the logic behind that?
I mean, you're totally right. There's two outrageous views here. I mean, oil at 150 sounds outrageous for sure, given how we are likely to get into a weakening demand environment from here. But certainly the supply is being controlled by some key players, and then there are a lot of volatility in the oil prices right now. And U.S. economy is still proving to be pretty resilient as of now. I mean, again, like I've clarified in the beginning, this is not our base view, but if we do see oil prices getting to $150, the real fun prediction is that Saudis, buy the European Champions League. And, we've seen the Saudi Crown Prince, MBS, he has shown a lot of interest in football. He's already bought some very expensive football players. So we know he's an enthusiast in that sports. And I think also, FIFA had earlier tried to buy that Champions League. I think they had $150 million on the table for that. But the offer was rejected, considering probably some bit of politics, but also obviously considering the fatigue that it could cause to players. But when Saudi comes into the picture, the money on the table multiplies pretty quickly. And then it gets really difficult to reject an offer like that. So we think he would be potentially successful to buy out that European Champions League and then eventually convert it into a very global Champions League where, we get something like a FIFA World Cup, but for the clubs from around the world.
Now, while we are talking about oil, we have to talk about the US. So specifically, I think 2024 is it's an election year for the US. And, this is going to be really tricky for Biden, right? Because I think the public opinion is that he didn't manage the Russian-Ukraine war, geopolitics really well. And of course, the inflationary environment that the US is experiencing, and of course, worldwide. And, in the article, I think it was quite interesting to point out that Robert Kennedy could potentially win the election. What's the logic behind that?
Yeah, no, totally. I think election year, not just in the US, but we have some key elections around the world. And, from what we've seen so far this year in 2023, looking at Argentina, looking at the Dutch elections as well, there's this rising tide against the incumbents. And not just the incumbents, in fact, any of the political leaders, there's this general sentiment shift that is happening, that as a voter, when we go to vote, we are not voting for a policy or a person who can implement a particular policy direction for the country, but you're voting for people who you hate the least you know. And this is a really tricky situation. This I think, and this is something which can have repercussions for the global economy as we get into 2024. But yeah, talking particularly about the US election, you raised it quite well there. I mean, Biden's facing this increasing, lack of support because of concerns around his age, certainly, but also because, again, as we get into 2024 and through that year, we will see economic headwinds continue to rise. There's certainly a lot of recession risks on the horizon, and we will not be also able to say very comfortably that he's won the war against inflation. As much as, yes, inflation has come down, we're not back to those 2% levels. And I think that last mile for inflation will continue to remain quite tough there. So certainly a lot of issues that Biden can face, and then his competitor, which is an even more interesting discussion, Trump. Certainly, he has a strong base, I think, in some parts of the U.S. But given how radical he has been, I think he is also losing support with some of his hardcore supporters. So we thought that this is potentially looking at what is happening globally and what's happening domestically in the U.S. There is a chance that we could see a wild card, a third-party candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., as we've written there in our prediction, that he could potentially emerge as a winner. I think also it kind of simplifies things for the U.S. Population, where if you are traditionally a Democrat or a Republican, but you don't like your candidate and you're forced to kind of not vote for the other party, that third party option kind of simplifies that choice for you. So I think, and then of course, I mean, the Russia-Ukraine war or the Middle East crisis have been big concerns this year as well. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he has a very pro-peace kind of a message. So that could potentially click well. I mean, I think we've already seen in some of the opinion polls very recently that some of the younger voters have been kind of shifting towards Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as well. So I think, yes, it's still outrageous for sure to say that we could have a third-party candidate winning the U.S. election this year. But, and when we do these predictions, I must bring you back to that. We also still try to understand what will be the market impact for something like this if it was to come true. And for this prediction, I think it's really important to watch your portfolios if you have exposure to, say, defense companies, healthcare companies, because these are things that he's going to attack on. If he has a pro-peace message, defense companies could potentially suffer as a result of that. And even the big tech, because there is a likelihood that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. could also have a war on monopolies.
Now, it sounds like it's going to be a really tough fight next year. Now that you've mentioned about tech, one of the, I would say, upcoming technologies that has really generated a lot of buzz in the market is generative AI.
Yeah.
And, I've seen how, it can potentially change our lives and improve a lot of our productivity. The thing is, there's also a bit of backlash with regards to generative AI as well. It comes with the fake news and things like that, and it could potentially attract regulations.
Yeah.
So what's the what are the potential, I would say, spillovers from this, and of course, how could it even affect traditional media companies, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this year has all been about that hype that generative AI has created. We have done several articles and several, discussions with clients about what are the opportunities in this space, which is certainly I think, key discussion that we will carry forward into the next year as well. But I think, again, the blind angle, as we call it in the beginning, when we try to look at that, I think the threat, the risks that generative AI brings as well, is quite key to consider at this stage, which probably the investors have been ignoring as of now because of all the hype that went into that field. So I think one of the trigger points for us to come up with this outrageous view was, in one of our internal calls, and probably you would remember that, but it's more for our audiences here, that, we had a deep fake on our chief investment officer, Steen Jacobsen, being displayed on one of our global calls. And he was standing and saying something that didn't make a lot of sense, to put it very politely. But it was his body, it was his voice that was saying something utter rubbish, right? So I think that for us was the moment there where we realized that this is something we need to kind of start talking to clients about. And so that's why we came up with this prediction. And then the whole idea behind this is that we could have these deep fakes kind of creating a national security threat somewhere. It could be a deep fake on President Biden talking to maybe Putin and, kind of giving some key information. It could be a deep fake on somebody else, but trying to get some critical government information out. And, if that gets leaked, I think that is going to be really a catalyst for regulation to ramp up in this sector pretty quickly from there. And when regulation ramps up, what happens is that hype gets killed. Maybe the venture capital that has been going in that space kind of starts to dry up a little bit. So we have to consider those risks when we are going there. And you obviously talk about traditional media companies, which is extremely important because the overall psychological impact that a development like that can have is that you see a general plunge in the trust of the internet. I think when that happens, what really is the market outcome for that is that investors flock back to the traditional media company. As you say, it's somebody who's been authorized by the government to kind of send out information, send out news or something like that. So something like the New York Times, right? I mean, we do think as if this pushback happens on generative AI, we could see these traditional media companies, the listed ones, go up in price.
Right. Another issue that has drawn a lot of interest this year are the weight loss drugs. To be specific, it's the GLP-1 weight loss medications such as Wegovy and Ozempic. Now, it is a very interesting drug that we have, in modern history, right? So, what's the what's the outlook, or should I say outrageous predictions of when it comes to this?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a wave, right? I mean, these obesity drugs, and we've seen as a result of that, Novo Nordisk, which has been the leader in space, it became the most valuable company, I should say, in Europe. And we are seeing a lot of the other pharmaceutical companies, Eli Lilly, for example, also trying to come up with its own drug. In fact, it seems like their drug is even more effective. I think the wave has also been caused by the fact that not just obesity, these drugs are also being able to treat the other diseases that come as a result of obesity. So heart conditions or, kidney conditions as well. A lot of success is being seen on those fronts as well. So very interesting space, absolutely. But we were trying to be outrageous. I mean, the general, outlook is certainly that they continue to rise. And as a result of that, the fast food companies, the McDonald's and the donut companies and the Coca-Colas kind of suffer, which has been some bit of a trend this year. And that's because when patients are on these drugs, it kills their desire to have these unhealthy foods or unhealthy lifestyles, as we would say it. But yeah, in trying to be outrageous, and I think we are trying to, think from a psychological lens here as well. Is just taking a pill going to be enough to kind of solve your problems? So we thought that, we could see a turn of events where, of course, as insurance kind of starts to cover these drugs, demand is going to rise pretty rapidly. That's the base prediction the market has as well. But as that happens, what we are thinking is that maybe these drug companies are not able to supply enough drugs. So there's this demand-supply imbalance that's happening. So doctors keep putting a lot of patients on those drugs, but these patients have to really wait like 6 months, a year or so to kind of really get their hands on, to that drug really. And while that happens, while they're waiting, they know they're going to get it eventually. They stop exercising, they go back to those unhealthy lifestyle habits. They probably start eating more of that junk food or
Yeah.
fast food, I should say, as we just talked about in that turn of events. I mean, again, a very psychological question: is really getting a pill the answer, or should maybe the governments make gyms free for the public to kind of deal with this? But certainly, obesity is a huge issue. If these situation is going to turn around like that, we will potentially see obesity rates going higher as well, and that is a drag on global productivity levels. But if you look at it in terms of market impact, certainly that means that we could see the stock prices of these fast food companies, like I said, McDonald's or Coca-Cola, potentially, they could start to rise again and show a pretty significant increase from here.
Well, these are really, really interesting
Yeah.
perspectives, right? So, if our viewers are interested to know more, the 2024 Outrageous Predictions Report is also available on our Saxo Trader platform. So, do help us to like our video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.